chair the City of Charlotte Redistricting Committee. Welcome to our Tuesday, October 12th meeting here at the Government Center. We are taping this live here at CH14, and we have members that are joining us virtually. So what I would like to do first is to have everyone in the room introduce themselves. Then we'll pivot to those who are visiting with us virtually, and then we'll get right into the meeting. Again, my name is Malcolm Graham. I serve as chairman of the Redistricting Committee.
Ed Driggs, committee member.
Greg Phipps, committee member.
Mr. Winston, you can introduce yourself.
Braxton Winston at large.
Welcome, Mr. Winston. For those who are in the room with us.
Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Mac McFarley, Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Tom Jones, City Attorney's Office.
Rebecca Hefner, Innovation and Technology.
Thank you, everyone. We will get right into the agenda. Our agenda is relatively light, but we hope to make some meaningful decisions today with the concurrence of the committee members in terms of a recommended step forward. But before we do that, would love to just thank the public for participating in our October 5th public engagement session. I thought the meeting went extremely well. We were able to answer a number of questions from our constituents throughout the city, both in terms of answering those questions at the meeting as well as through our email system. So we want to thank everyone for their participation. And what I would love to do is just kind of our first agenda item is to discuss comments received from the public input listening session. And so we'll start there and open the floor to any members of the committee based on anything you heard during the public engagement session, anything you heard from the public since that session has ended that you would like to bring forward to the committee for consideration, and then we'll move forward from that point. I will start first and foremost. We did receive some emails relating to the maps, and one in particular came from the Hidden Valley community in reference to precincts 42 and 82. Mr. McCarley, could you kind of please, we talked about this previously before the meeting, could you kind of walk us through, again, precinct 42 and 82 and why they're placed where they are, and then we'll open it up to the general committee members for their observations, questions, and input. Mr. McCarley.
Thank you, Chairman Graham. Two issues with this move. First is that 42 and 82 really need to stay together. They are two halves of the Hidden Valley neighborhood. And what that means is that if you keep those two together, you've got a larger block number of people that we have to compensate for. Remember that we were trying very hard to get population out of districts 3, 2, and 4. And using those precincts, if you keep 42 and 82 together, it means that you've pretty much decided that you have to have one other precinct that's about the right size. So once we had done the community of interest to keep Hidden Valley together, the next issue was just balancing the numbers, and 26 is the one that made that work. I do believe that looking at those neighborhoods, they fit as well in District 1 as they do in District 4 under the community of interest consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Any questions from the committee members in reference to that? Again, this is one of the questions that came in through our email system relating to Hidden Valley and those two particular precincts. And so any questions from the committee members to Mr. McCauley in reference to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is
welcome, Councilmember Ashmera.
Thank you. So, Mr. McCarty, are you suggesting those precincts stay in District 1 or in District 4?
I'm suggesting that they be in District 1.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Greg.
Yeah, what was the comments from the Hidden Valley neighborhood in reference to their two precincts?
The comments is that they really wanted to remain in District 4. And so that was the gist of their comments. And what I wanted to do, I talked to Mr. McCauley in reference to what was the rationale for the move. You just heard his explanation on why he made the recommendation to move it from 4 to 1. And so that's where we are, Councilmember.
Just one added note, that was a decision that I made early on in the drafting. Plan B that we started with was really the first plan after the least change attempt, which was Plan A, and it just made sense to keep those two together, and then it's really just balancing the numbers.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Any follow-up questions to that?
Mr. Chairman, it's Ed Driggs.
Welcome, Mr. Drakes.
Thank you. I was just wondering what Councilmember Johnson thinks, since she seems to be quite passionate on issues around Hidden Valley. Have we talked to her about it?
I spoke with Councilmember Johnson at length in reference to it, and she's following the process of the committee.
Right, so she hasn't expressed an opinion about this allocation of the precincts.
She's following the process of where the committee is leading us in total, so she's quite
Agrees,
aware
in other words.
of where they're placed today.
Okay, thank you.
So as a follow-up, Mr. Graham, as a result of keeping those two precincts together, would that result in any other changes in District 4 and District 1?
Mr. McCarley?
There are some other minor changes that we're looking at. Again, we're trying to move population out of 2, 3, and 4. So in Plan B, and by the way, I have developed a Plan B1 that I've tinkered with a little bit, and we'll get to that later. But in both Plans B and B1, we move Precinct 205 from 4 into 5 because we need to push population down that way, which is the same issue that we were trying to move 42, 82, and 26. We just need to get population out of 4 and into 1, 5, and 6. So it does move 205. Other questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Gray, welcome back.
Yeah, did Hidden Valley indicate the reasons why, their preference was to remain in District 4 rather than move over to District 1?
From what I gathered, and again, it was an email, so I read what was there. It was a historical preference.
Okay.
I will say that changing that piece of map B or B1 will require some serious work to redo the population. If you look at the precincts and the district map, there aren't very many precincts that border 1 and 5 out of 4. So finding precincts to move to shed population from 4 to the 2 precincts just to its south is relatively difficult. There aren't that many to choose from.
This would be a major unwinding of the thread if we remove it, right? Again, as we talked about earlier, it's a dominoes effect. You kind of move 2 or 3, then the whole map becomes compromised. And so have you heard the recommendation of Mr. McCarley in terms of him understanding the rationale for the change and why he's don't want to put words in his mouth. He stands firm in terms of the recommendation. Okay. The other questions were answered that we received via email were a duplication of questions that were asked and answered at the public information gathering, nothing as specific as of Hidden Valley scenario. And so any other comments from the committee members in terms of their impressions of the public information session itself and or any comments they received after it was over that they would like to bring forward to the committee.
Mr. Chair, it's Ed.
Floor is yours.
I was actually quite pleased that at the listening session, we didn't get any major challenges to these maps. So most of what we heard, I think, was points of clarification, of information, and no howls of protest, and I think that's a good thing, given the potential sensitivity of the topic. I haven't had feedback, and probably wouldn't, frankly. Most of the movement, as you know, of the precincts does not affect my district. So don't have any strong input on that. We have been given this Plan B1. I wonder if we can understand what that's about.
Yes, sir. We're going to turn the floor over to Mr. McCarley to get his impressions of the public information session, what he heard from a number of the speakers, and any recommended adjustments that he would like to offer based on what we read at the meeting. Mr. McCarley, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is it possible to pull up the B1 map? I'm getting a yes nod. It's coming.
And we sent that to everyone's email box, so you should have it in front of you as well. And it is now on our screen. Mr. McCarley.
We continued looking at the issues of community of interest, and the big change from B to B1 is that I moved precincts 5 and 46 into District 5. If you look at District 84, which is immediately to the east of Precinct 45, in the bottom left-hand corner of 84 is the Eastland Mall site. And if you're looking at communities of interest, the Central Avenue corridor has a fairly strong community of interest, especially as Eastland Mall works toward redevelopment. It just made sense to move 5 and 45 into 5 because they have more in common with East Charlotte than they did with, which is District 5, than they did with District 1. So that's the major point of the change from B to B1. It was to better align those two precincts with the community of interest that I believe they share with District 5.
Okay, so you heard, is this a recommendation for the committee, Mr. McCarley?
Yes, sir, it is. I think it is a better map than B.
Okay.
I'm surprised that the Eastern Mall site, I always thought it was in District 5. Are we saying it was in District 1?
Eastland Mall is in District 5 and has been in District 5. However, the two precincts immediately up Central Avenue toward uptown were not. And
Okay.
it seemed to me that moving them into 5 made more sense than leaving them in 1.
Oh, okay.
Okay, members, we have a new version of Plan B for your consideration, which is draft Plan B1. You heard Mr. McCarley's rationale and explanation for the slight change. As we said earlier in our previous meeting, these maps were subject to modification. This is a minor modification that we bring before you, and I asked the committee for your consideration on this particular map. Any questions, comments, concerns in reference to draft Plan B1?
Mr. Chairman, I left out one piece about the change from in B1.
The floor is yours.
By putting 5 and 45 into 5, we needed to move something else to rebalance population, and it allowed me to put Precinct 3 back into District 1, which is where it is today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
yes, I appreciate Mr. McCarley's recommendation in terms of keeping communities of interest together here. And I know that was one of the comments from our public engagement session. So I don't have any concerns.
Okay.
Was there any reaction by either council member for District 1 or 5 to this adjustment?
Could you repeat that question, Councilmember Phipps?
I'm interested in any feedback or reaction from either council member for District 1 or District 5 relating to the adjustment in creating map B1.
Councilmember Ashmera, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I have not heard any pushbacks from either council member.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McCarley?
early on in the process, I spoke with council members, and it was my impression that the District 5 representative wanted more of the precincts that he believed represented the East Charlotte community of interest. My guess is that he will be pleased with that change.
Okay. Floor is still open for questions, comments, concerns in reference to the proposed draft Plan B1. If not, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend Plan B1.
Second.
So, Mr. Chair, this is a motion to add B1 to the plans that we're considering. Does it have the effect of eliminating another plan?
No, this will be adding draft Plan B1 to the 3 maps that we already currently have. The next topic will be the pleasure of the committee to make a recommendation for council of the 4 plans moving forward.
Which we're not doing today, right?
I would like to do it if the council members, the members on the committee would like to do that. We talked about that at the last meeting, about whether or not we should make a recommendation prior to the public hearing, but we'll get to that once we carry this motion.
Okay.
All right? So there's a motion properly before us to adopt draft Plan B1. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. I'll call the roll. Councilmember Graham says yes. Councilmember Ashmera?
Yes.
Councilmember Driggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Phipps?
Yes.
That motion is carried 4-0. Now, I'd like to have a discussion in reference to the October 18th public forum. And again, what we talked about at our last meeting was whether or not it made sense for this committee to make a formal recommendation to the council prior to the public hearing. The rationale would be that the public hearing would give the public an opportunity to focus on one recommended map that the committee recommends to the Charlotte City Council. If we were to make a recommendation, that would be the recommendation we would be making to the council today. The other maps, which would be maps A, B, B1, and C, those that do not be recommended to move forward will still be in our parking lot, and that once we have a general discussion with the Charlotte City Council, they will have our recommendation, but they will also have access to, and of course, council can do what they desire to do, right? They can take our recommendation or not. But I think it would be probably appropriate moving forward that we have a recommended map prior to the public hearing, and we make our recommendation today. That's up to the will of this committee, so that discussion is open, that decision rather is open for discussion, and I'll follow the lead of the committee. Floor is open for discussion.
Mr. Chair, it's Ed. I thought the agenda for this meeting included 2 information items and did not include an action item.
It does, but again, like I said, as it's printed, it's information only. It's the pleasure of the committee to do, make a decision today if they would like to do so. I'm not sure if that violates anything, Mr. Attorney.
No, what you have is the agenda there. If the council wants to make this, add this and move forward as
Mr. Attorney, is your microphone muted? I can't hear you.
Sorry.
No, the agenda is informational only. The question ultimately is, does the committee want to make a specific recommendation of a map? And that's what's being discussed right now. It's at the pleasure of the committee if you want to do that or not.
Right, but isn't it a little odd that we don't announce to the public that we intend to take an action like that in order to give people who might be concerned about it? I have a feeling, too, that for us to make a recommendation without having been through the outreach process, the rest of the outreach process, it abridges, our responsibility to the public. I think before we reach our own conclusion in committee, we should have heard everything that we're going to hear. So I think it's premature for us to actually offer a map at this point. But to the legal point, isn't it normal that we would announce action items in when we announce a meeting?
So ultimately, this is at the will of the committee, but usually, yes, if there's an action item that the committee is expecting to take, that would be on the agenda. The issue here is whether or not the committee wants to make a recommendation, keeping in mind that you're not eliminating maps. The question is, do you want to go into the public hearing with a recommendation from the committee, or just simply listen? And that's what the point of discussion is right now.
So, Mr. Chair, if we arrive at a map today, is that the end of the work of this committee?
Again, let me back up. One, I don't have a preference, right? So we can make it today, or we can make it after the public hearing. So I'll follow the will of the committee. Obviously, we're getting to the end. We have a November 8th deadline that we said we would like to land this plane on the council's and the mayor's desk, and so we're closely getting there. The public hearing is next week, the 18th, right? And so it's next week, and so it's just whether or not the committee wants to publicly identify a preference or not prior to the public hearing. And again, the floor is open to the committee, and I'll follow the desire of the committee.
So I'll just conclude my comments by saying I think it would look better and be better if we had heard the public hearing before reaching a conclusion within this committee. Thank you, sir.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
Mr.
Councilmember
Chair,
Fitz.
Yeah, I think the reservation that I have is that this map, this revised map, this B1, was not available for public comment during the listening session that we just had. And for us to put forth this map through a recommendation at the upcoming public hearing, I think could potentially confuse participants in that meeting, in as much as they have not had an opportunity to comment on this map up until this point, if we refer or put this map forward for approval today. So that's what, that was one of the points I raised at the meeting, that if we did change the map or make any adjustments to the map, would we have an opportunity to give the public a chance to review those revisions and why we thought it was appropriate to make changes, no matter how, insignificant they may be, that at least they would have benefit of the entire slate of maps at their disposal. So that's what concerns me with making a recommendation at this time, since we did make a revision to a map that wasn't available for public inspection and comment previously.
I think that's even a fairer point, right? And so I will tilt that way as well. And so I guess the conversation is moot at this point, right? We will just bring forward to the public hearing 4 maps, maps A, B, B1, and C. We'll have our public hearing, so the public will have an opportunity to weigh in on B1. They have not done that, to Mr. Gregg's point. And we'll convene shortly thereafter, and then we'll make a recommendation to the council and prior to the November 8th meeting. I think that makes sense as well.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more comment.
Yes, ma'am, floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'm obligated to share this letter that I just received via a text message. This is from Hidden Valley senior residents. They are standing in opposition to the redistricting process, and it's a long letter I've not had an opportunity to read, but they are voicing their opposition, and especially if the Hidden Valley is not allowed to stay in District 4. And since I just got this, I wanted to let the committee know. I will ask constituent who sent this letter to send it to the committee and full council.
Okay. And what we would do is encourage them to attend the public hearing so they can voice their concerns and their unreadiness in reference to the move. Once we have the public hearing, obviously we'll reconvene for another meeting prior to our presentation to the city council. So I'm looking at my email and I have not received that, but I look forward to, you can forward that to the committee so we all can see it and understand their perspective and encourage them to attend and to participate in the public hearing, which is scheduled for October 18th. Fair enough. Thank you, Councilmember Ashmere.
Mr. Chair,
Who's that?
I have one question.
Welcome, Councilmember Winston.
Hey, since it does seem that Hidden Valley, those two precincts are bearing most of the weight of the redistricting, are we able to quantify or do we have any specific outreach to those, to the Hidden Valley community? I know that anybody can participate in the a public hearing, but I think, it might, be a good thing to make sure that those folks have a little extra effort in terms of the specific outreach. Are we doing anything there currently? And do we have the capability to do that if we haven't already?
Good question. I'm not sure they're bearing most of the weight of the redistricting. I think we moved about 15 precincts in all, and so a number of precincts were moved, including 2 in Hidden Valley for sure. I know I've spoken with Councilmember Johnson. She represents that community for sure. She is following the process in terms of what is happening to those 2 particular precincts and how it fits into the bigger picture. So I will certainly outreach to Hidden Valley myself. No one has called me or emailed me as of yet from that community. The first I heard of it was through the email box that the city has set up. So I will outreach and find out whether or not we could meet with them, find out what their unreadiness is, encourage them to attend the October 18th public hearing so we all can hear what those concerns are. And I will also work with Mr. McCarley to make sure that they understand the rationale and how we move forward. I will say, as I said earlier in the meeting, I did take a look at the numbers. I'm very familiar with the Hidden Valley community. I represented that community for well over 14 years, understanding those 2 precincts in particular. But again, once we start peeling away the onion and you start moving precincts around, especially those 2 which are high in population and demographics, the whole map changes. And so that is something that the committee will have to take under consideration when we have those conversations, not only with Hidden Valley, but other communities who are also shifting from one district to another. They are not the only one, right? And so it's a balancing act, Mr. Winston, but we'll make sure, as you recommended, that the appropriate outreach is made.
Mr. Chair,
The floor is yours, Mr. Phipps.
will this public hearing be a combination of virtual and in-person, or how would that work?
I'm getting a head nod that it's going to be a combination of virtual and in person. And so they will have 2 opportunities, 2 forums to address us as well. And obviously, prior to the public hearing, I will make sure that we reach out to the Hidden Valley community. We also will rope in their district representative to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of how we move forward with that particular community. And as I said earlier, there are 14, 15 precincts that move, and so, you know, it's a process.
Mr. Chair, it's Ed.
Floor is yours, Ed.
For one, we need to make sure the public is aware that the government center is going to be open for in-person attendance at our meetings starting on the 13th. So that option does exist, and we should try to make sure we get the word out about that. My other point was the B1 map and associated spreadsheet does not include all three of the spreadsheets that we got for the other maps. So I'm wondering if we can get to that other information for the B1 map as well.
To the latter question, yes, we'll make sure you get all the data and the write-ups that you need for the new draft plan B1. To the former question, the building opens on the 18th, not the 13th. And I'm getting ahead now.
Yes, I think that if we were going to admit the public, as I read the memo, we were going to admit the public to our meeting starting on the 13th, and the building will be fully open on the 18th. I mean, we can get clarification about that, but
And Mr. Driggs, so it's the 18th for evening meetings only for council commissioners and school board, and then on November 1st, the building is completely open. So, but starting on the 18th, this coming Monday, the building will be open for all meetings.
That is the 18th, okay, yeah, this coming Monday. So in any case, that does mean that for the public, the hearing, that the building will be open for members of the public. Is that right?
Correct.
Which is also on the 18th?
Correct.
All right, so my point was just I want the people who may be interested in this somehow to be made aware of the fact, maybe on the redistricting website or by some other means, that they do have the option of attending the hearing in person.
We can definitely add that, and they can do that, or they can stay at home or at work, and they can participate virtually from there.
Right, both ways, right. And so those numbers, and also Mr. McCarley, you gave us your little score sheet for the maps. Would your score sheet for B1 be the same as your score sheet for B?
I'll have to think about that, Mr. Driggs. I believe that B1 is an improvement over B simply because it does a better job of maintaining community of interest in District 5, so let me look at that.
I have a concern about Hidden Valley, but I'm not going to weigh in until I've had a chance to investigate further. But if you wouldn't mind, could you generate one of these sheets for B1 just so we have that as a reference?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Floor is open.
Mr. Graham?
Councilmember Winston.
Mr. Driggs brought up a good point about the building reopening, which led me to another thought. That means that we can do more face-to-face engagement. I would encourage the committee and staff to consider, in the light of that, of doing a listening session in the Hidden Valley community. I also would have a question about that scoring to Mr. McCarley, and I'd love to understand in one spot we're giving a better score to keeping those two precincts in District 5, but I would like to know how the moving of Hidden Valley into District 1 from 4 scores and by itself, and in relation to some of the other decisions that are being made. I understand that you're probably considering the move of Hidden Valley more from a population standpoint, just from a straight number standpoint, but I would be very interested in seeing the scoring differentials and moving that community of interest.
Just one small correction. Precincts 5 and 45, I'm proposing to move into District 5. They were not in District 5 before, but My assessment is that that Central Avenue corridor is a very strong community of interest, and that's why I moved those two. So that they are a direct move. But precincts 42 and 82, Hidden Valley, have been in the plans for drafts B, B1, and C from the beginning. They were moved from 4 into 1. So that's not a recent move. That's something I did in the very early days. Again, if you look at the map, there really aren't but about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 precincts that you can move out of 4 into some other district to balance population. There aren't many choices there because the precincts in District 4
we know that, yeah,
are
if we
large.
were to do something
Mr. Hawley has the
different,
floor. Mr. Winston? Continue.
I didn't mention that.
well, we know if we
B,
moved
B1,
something,
and C.
we just have to think from a different standpoint, whether you did it early in the process or not. I would imagine that it has a score because it's following a certain type of rubric that you're looking at or something like that. And if we did something different, we would just have to do something different. But like I said, you moved 2 and you made a recommendation of moving 2 from 1 to 5 because of, like you said, the community of interest. Like I said, I would like to know more about the analysis of those 2 in Hidden Valley, kind of following that same train of thought. You don't have to answer it right now. We can talk about it later as we continue to go through this process.
Well, I will give you part of the answer now, and that was I made the decision early on to keep 42 and 82 together, whatever district they were in, because the split between those 2 precincts runs right down the middle of the Hidden Valley neighborhood. So the goal was to keep those 2 together, and once you've made that decision, it shortens even more the list of precincts that can be moved from 4 to 1 or 5 to balance numbers.
Okay. All right, so what we will do is we will engage with any neighborhood who poses a question in reference to the maps. We encourage any neighborhoods who have questions, concerns, or comments to participate at the October 18th public hearing. And we will outreach specifically to Councilmember Johnson to weave her in just to make sure that she's aware of some of the concerns from her constituents, and we'll go from there. Okay? All right. So if there's not any comments, this is how we're moving forward. We will have our public hearing on October 18th. The Government Center will be open, so members of the public have the opportunity to participate in that public hearing virtually and or by coming to the Government Center. We would love to see you. The maps that will be on display will be maps A, B, B1, and C for public comments. And this will be the second time that the public had the opportunity to weigh in on maps A, B, and C. The first time for map B1. Once the public hearing is concluded and we receive public comments, again, we will gather once again to recalibrate. There may or may not be adjustments based on what we hear at the public hearing, and then the committee will be poised to make a recommendation to the City Council for final approval of our redistricting map around the November 8th timeframe. Any questions, comments, concerns from the committee members in reference to that outline? There being none,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McCarley.
might I suggest that you look at scheduling another meeting of the committee after the 18th?
Yes, I thought I said that, but I applied that. I probably didn't say I applied that we will, and we will have a meeting after the 18th where we'll consider again the comments from the public and adjust maps accordingly if necessary, and then offer the council a preference recommendation for their consideration at our November 8th meeting. Keep in mind there's deadlines beyond November 8th with the Board of Elections that we have to meet. And so my goal, my objective, as I pledged to the mayor, is that we will be ready as a council to make a final decision at our November 8th meeting. And so I think we're poised to do that unless something happens out of the ordinary.
Mr. Chair, would it be a good idea to consider while we're all here when we might have that next meeting, to throw a timeout and see if we can agree on it, or?
I will have to look to my right, and Dinana, I think she's going to need maybe a moment or two, so we'll send something via the email. I'm not sure she's prepared to kind of look at 5 different schedules right now, so we will get something out to you as soon as possible.
All right.
Thank you, sir. If all hearts and minds are alike, I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.